Hello, my beautiful human. Welcome back to the She Did It Anyway podcast. I am introducing our first ever guest. We have been doing solo episodes for a while now, and I literally cannot believe that my first guest is the one and only Jaclyn Johnson. This episode is so exciting for me in so many ways, and you're going to hear how I met Jaclyn, the process of like how I first froze when I saw her. It's actually hilarious. And you're going to learn a lot about entrepreneurship, raising money, what all of that looks like, what makes a good business, why businesses fail, and so much more. But before we dive in, I would love to read her bio for you. Jaclyn Johnson created her career, a powerhouse entrepreneur. By the time she was 28, Johnson had sold her first company, invested in multiple female-owned startups, and launched her second multi-million-dollar company, Create and Cultivate. Johnson recognized a gap in conversations, resources, events, and community for female millennial entrepreneurs and responded with a solution, Create and Cultivate, a widely popular media platform and nationwide conference. In the process, Jaclyn's own work-life philanthropy, built on the cornerstones of female entrepreneurs, hustling hard, and innovation, has propelled her voice to the forefront of the discussion on workplace equality, a new thought leader for millennial women and Gen-Z-ers on the career come-up. This passion for supporting female entrepreneurs led her to co-found New Money Ventures, a venture capital firm and brand studio on a mission to fund and build the next generation of game-changing female-led companies. Named a Forbes 30 Under 30, an Adweek disruptor, and profiled in Fast Company, the LA Times, Entrepreneur, and more, Johnson has earned her way to the front lines of workplace revolution at a time when change agents and disruptors are flexing real influence. I am so excited for you to dive into this episode. It is a juicy one, and I am so honored to have Jaclyn Johnson here with me. Jaclyn Johnson, welcome to She Did It Anyway. I'm so excited to have you here.
I'm so excited. I didn't know I was going to be the first guest, so lots of pressure, no big deal.
It's going to be amazing. And we were talking earlier about just like being in person and connecting, which makes me think back to like 2020. I had gotten laid off, and it was like my first introduction of entrepreneurship. And I had worked at Yahoo before, and I was like, okay, I need to find like this like women's network to join, or like, where do I learn about all the things? And I found Create and Cultivate. And I remember seeing your video on the website, and I'm like, oh, who is this woman? Like, I'm so excited. And I joined like the insider membership that you guys have, consumed the content, felt good. And then 2021, you guys had the Small Business Summit in New York. And it was my first ever event. And I got out of the Uber, and it was like, it's insane that you've even cultivated women that get dressed head to toe to go to Create and Cultivate. So I got my blowout. I'm coming from Boston, got out of my Uber, waited in line. Everybody's like so anxious. I walk upstairs. Everybody goes to snack bar. I take a right and to the little shops that you guys had, the market. And you are the first person that I see, okay? It's just so crazy having you as a guest, because I see you and I freeze. And I literally was like, I have nothing to say to this woman. And so I literally was like, hi. Like, I had nothing to say. So again, fast forward, event was amazing. I met so many amazing people who I'm now like best friends with, which is nuts.
That.
And I remember DMing you and being like, hi, I saw you, but I had nothing of value to say to you, but I just wanted to say thank you for the event. Okay. So fast forward now, 2023, you're a guest on my podcast, which blows my goddamn mind. Like, it's just insane.
This is what I want. This is my career vision come to life, right? Like, the thing about Create and Cultivate that's so special and magical is like, yes, we don't have like a product per se, but like you are the product of what we were looking to build. And anytime I hear a story where it's like, I met my business partner, I launched my company, I was laid off, I ended up going to your event, whatever, like that's the point of that conference. And also that's the magic that you can't can't bottle up and sell.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. And it's interesting. So leading up to this, and I was saying it to you earlier, like I became a full-blown journalist. And so if someone doesn't know who you are or what your story was, they have to read Work Party. It is just so insane to see the transition between when you first started, like 22, 23, moving from New York, going to LA. Like, again, someone looks at me, I look at you now and I'm like, oh, I could never do what she does. Or I'm not as talented or as witty or as smart, like all of these things. We just make all of these things up in our head, right? And so again, you read this book and I'm reading it and I'm like, this is insane. Like you got laid off when you're 23. You're starting all over again. You have a blog. You're starting an agency. You break up with your partner for your business. Like all of these things are happening. And I'm interested to know now, having sold CNC, having New Money Ventures, what are your thoughts when you reflect back to that 23-year-old Jaclyn?
Yeah, I think a few things. One is that I had to go through all of those things to become the entrepreneur I am today. And I think, because we have Instagram and all these things, everyone thinks the journey is this straight line. But there's that meme that's like, no, the entrepreneurship journey is, and it's like a scribbled weird line. And like, that could not be more accurate.
Yeah.
And I think every single thing leading up to what is now, and, from the outside is like a very successful career, was made up of a lot of mistakes and learnings along the way, coupled with the resiliency and passion to just keep going. And I think the reason I think you probably related to Work Party, the reason why other people like Work Party is that I'm basically like, I am you. I am everyone who was just trying to figure it out on their own in a new city, in a new market, and just went for it and made a ton of mistakes. But here's how I did it. And I really tried to give as much real information as possible, because that also is what we're trying to do with Create and Cultivate, is like, there is a formula to a lot of these things. There are secrets to success. Obviously, hard work is part of that, but I didn't understand why everyone was gatekeeping all this information in the way that they were. And I felt like we need to get this out there so more women can see what I see, can learn what I've learned, and go out and do it themselves. And you're like the embodiment of that.
It's crazy when you say that, because a lot of it, yes, it is hard work. I 100% understand that. But it's insane how much of the mindset goes into it. And like just reading through, there was part of it where you said like you had a choice of like getting up and going after it again, or like getting pizza, and you're like, I got the pizza, I cried, I sat there. And it's like, you need that minute, right?
Yeah.
And again, you've built such a aspirational personal brand for yourself, this reputation that you've built for over like so many years now, right? And you're constantly pivoting, and just it's so inspiring. It's really, really cool. I would love to talk a little bit about the transition from going to having an agency to then creating events, not gatekeeping. Like, what did you know? How did you know that you wanted to provide all of this content? Like, you don't gatekeep. Even the speakers at Create and Cultivate, they share every single thing. The questions, the lineup is like so strategically thought. I'm interested to know, like, how did you know how to do that? Like, literally, how did you know how to do that?
Totally. So I think No Subject, which is my first business, which was the marketing and events and influencer agency, I kind of joke that was my MBA, like in many ways. That's where I made all the mistakes. I learned all the things, and I was able to go into Create and Cultivate with all of those learnings and lessons. And what was interesting is that I had started out as a blogger influencer in like, it's like truly like the 1800s, but it was like early 2010, whatever. There was like 15 of us at that point. But I was in that world early, and I knew that there was something there. I knew that this was going to be like the next new normal to take over editorial, and really these were going to be people setting the trends. But I didn't know how to work with that quite yet. Like, I was in it, I was working with brands early, but I was sort of like, brands don't know how to talk to influencers, and influencers don't know how to talk to brands. They're treating brands like, or influencers like press, and they're not press. So it was kind of this weird landscape where I was like, I feel like I can be the bridge to this conversation. And the kind of reality tipping point of like Create and Cultivate, and the way that No Subject played a role in that was a few different things. So No Subject was an agency that specialized in working with brands to create at the beginning, social media campaigns, towards the end, influencer and influencer events. And we would work with these brands like L'Oreal and Uber and Microsoft, massive brands, who would give us these insane budgets to be like, we want to target, influencers like in Napa, for instance. And like, we did this massive L'Oreal Paris influencer trip in Napa. Like, I joke now thinking about the Tarte Cosmetics trip that like blew up TikTok, but I was like, that was me putting those on for so long. And that's what we did. And what kind of sparked this idea was a few different things. One is my sister, who's like an amazing wedding photographer in Florida, was following me, obviously, like seeing all these events we're doing. And she was like, I would die to go to an event like that. And it kind of hit me where I was like, yeah, why aren't there consumer events that are beautiful, that look like that give you this, that make you feel like you're an influencer? You know, everyone's watching these influencers and liking their content, but they're not experiencing what they get to experience. So that was like a nugget that stayed with me. And then after, with no subject, learning all the major milestones of starting a business, like how to do it legally, the mistakes you make, breaking up with a business partner, having people not pay you, and me being all alone, like Googling this information, like, how do I get people to pay me? Nightmare. I realized that the only information online at the time was like Forbes, Fortune, and it was speaking to, frankly, like old white men. And nothing spoke to me as a young millennial founder. And I was like, this feels like a missed opportunity. And so I started Create and Cultivate as like a side project, not even as like a real business, to be like, hey, let's throw really cool, amazing, beautiful events, which I know how to do. Let's tap my influencer network and get some really cool speakers. And let's talk about all these like cringe business issues we're all having that everyone's scared to talk about. And I never in a million years, I was like, cool, maybe 25 people will care. And turns out there's a lot of us that care and wanted that information. And really it spiraled from there, and like it grew and grew and grew and grew.
Yeah, I don't think people realize how much time and effort goes into bringing an in-person event to life. Like, it's actually insane. And so to be able to see, I think you said the biggest one was 1,500 people in 2020, right? Or 2019.
Right before.
Yeah. That's insane.
No, it's insane. You have to be a crazy person to want to do large scale events. Like, it is truly insane. And I also think the secret sauce that we had was that we did like everything in house. Like, truly every little bit was so controlled. And then we brought in people to support, of course. But I was a producer. I did all there was a moment in time where I basically did all the budgets, all the production. I wrote all the scripts for all the panels, like did all the like collateral. Like, I was a psychopath. But I'm glad I did that, because I knew every facet of the business, and I knew when I brought people on exactly what needed to get done. And that's what made our formula so tight, was that I didn't initially, because we had no money, frankly, we were scrappy, I didn't have someone come in and be like, here's how I would do it. I was just like, here's how I'm doing it. Here's how I'm doing it in the scrappiest way possible, because now I have all the information. I know how much every little bit costs, and this is how we do it. And it was this really tight formula that worked really well.
Yeah, and I think you've, in fact, like paved the way for a lot of other events. And I'll be honest, I mean, now 2023, I look at other events and there's so many brands that you look at and they're like, wait, they're actually trying to copy Create and Cultivate. This feels very Create and Cultivate.
It's so funny, because I was like having dinner with someone who was like with me in the early Create and Cultivate days, and he's like, every time I see like a flower wall, I'm like, Jaclyn created that. Like, even
or
if I see pampas grass, like I'm like, Jaclyn, you did that. And I'm like, I think it's so funny, but I think it's actually one of my greatest accomplishments is like to have someone say that looks so Create and Cultivate, to have a brand strong enough that people identify it with something is really hard to do. And I'm just so proud that we were able to do that. And the copycat thing is, I talk about it in my book a lot, but it's real. And it's hard when you are working 150-hour weeks and like slaving away, and to see someone like legit plagiarize your entire website or whatever it is. But, a good friend told me there's a reason why horses race with blinders. so they don't look at their competition. Like you have to keep looking at the finish line and you have to keep doing what you're doing and you have to keep innovating to stay ahead of the curve. And I think once I internalized that message and I was like, you know what, there's gonna be a million other copycats and I need to like brace for that. But I just have to focus on doing what I'm doing. And I think that's why we stayed ahead of the game was I didn't get distracted by what I saw around me. And honestly, it was good for the industry. It was good for women in business to have more accessibility and more events to go to, you know, because if we weren't doing an event in like Toledo, Ohio, but there was someone that looked and felt like a CNC that was doing that great. Like it was like I didn't want to limit access to information, but it also, you know, when you work hard on something, it's hard to see it being fully copied. But, you know, imitation is the most sincere form of flattery, even if it sucks.
That's what they say, and it drives me insane. And I've talked about it a lot. Is like sometimes the fastest businesses or the fastest way businesses fail is when they are just trying to copy someone else, and it's like that brand. Like the feeling that this brand gives, you can't copy. Like you just can't. Even if you copy down to the colors, you just can't. And so I love that you've built something so powerful. And so you sold Create and Cultivate in 2021. Congratulations. That's insane and huge. And I want to talk about a blend of one. What was that transition like? How did you know even the process of selling your company? Because you've always been bootstrapped.
Yeah.
Always.
Yeah. So I sold my first company in a much smaller, way more informal process than the Create and Cultivate business. But it opened up my mind to the fact that everything is sellable and everything has value, and that the process of selling a business is a business in itself. And I didn't know that at the time. Like that was truly like a new learning for me. And so basically in that first transaction, I got a lot of knowledge around the process, the diligence, how people value things, how people structure deals, all these things. So I got this like mini crash course. And so when I went to go build Create and Cultivate in a real way, full-time, et cetera, I knew I wanted to build to sell. And I had partners in the company who were really smart, successful women who had either sold companies or, you know, been at companies that had sold. And so collectively, you know, we were like, how do we build this company to sell? And like the reality was it's like, okay, you have to show high growth and profitability. And luckily they were hands-off partners. They're like, go do, let us know when you need help. And I was able to do that during the time period of running Create and Cultivate over the, you know, what was 10 plus years at that point. One of my partners sold her company, went through the process, and basically she got a crash course in how to sell when you're in, you know, the 7-8 figures of a business, what goes into it, how it all works. And so luckily with Create and Cultivate, what happened was kind of twofold. One was we were approached early on to be acquired in like 2018. And honestly, it was like early for the business. Like at that point, I think we had been formalized and truly making money for 2 years. Okay. We were a team of 8 maybe. And essentially we were approached by Refinery 29 and some other bigger brands. And it was exciting. You know, I was like, oh my God, like this happened so fast. Like this is so exciting. And we basically went down a formalized process where you bring on a banker. So you bring on a banker to represent the business. They help negotiate and get all of your information in order, you know, all of your financials, models, blah, blah, blah. Then that banker also helps you shop the deal. So basically they're like, great, Refinery 29 wants to buy you. Let's get 10 other people to like look at the business and get you the best possible partner and the best possible value. So at that point I pitched what felt like 4,000 businesses, but it was like whatever. And I met with a bunch of people and it was really exciting. Some were like not that exciting, but it was like good to kind of, you know, be in the mix and see who could be possibly interested. And we essentially got a lot of different offers. And they all were totally different. You know, some were strategic, some were more operational, some I knew they'd probably shut down the company. And I was like, I don't want to do that. And I had an M&A lawyer. We were like doing a lot of the paperwork. Anyway, long story short, we ended up going with a company where the deal fell through. So it didn't end up happening, which was brutal, especially because you spend a lot of money on the process. But I was like, okay, I now have everything ready to go. Like my financials are like audited and perfect. I know why the deal fell apart. which was mostly because they were like, you're too much of the business. Like you do everything. Like I was the only salesperson, like whatever.
Yeah.
And they're like, it's too reliant on you and it's too early. And that's basically why that fell apart. And so I was like, great. I'm going to hire a COO immediately. I need to build out the C-suite. I need more senior people in the company. Because at that point, it was really just like a mix of like a few directors, but mostly like entry to mid-level, and start building people around me so that like if and when we go out to sell again, like these are not problems that we're going to be dealing with. And that's what I did. So 2019 was like a huge year for us where, you know, I scaled up. I made really big hires. I like actually had an org chart where people, not every single person in the company reported to me. And was able to, I mean, I don't want to say I was able to like focus on the business. No, I was still in the weeds on every single thing, but there was infrastructure where before there wasn't. And then long story short, obviously 2020 was like the craziest year ever for event businesses. So we were like, we're definitely not selling this year. But luckily we were able to have a really strong 2020 despite the pandemic. And so we had a really good story showcasing our, you know, pretty much exponential growth through the top of 2020, how we were able to pivot successfully into digital. And so we went out for sale end of 2020, early 2021. And again, went through the process, met with a bunch of people, and then we did the deal with Corridor Capital.
It's so crazy. And it's funny to think that, so I found you guys, like I said, in 2020, and the content was so premium still that I felt like, wow, all of the courses, all of the memberships that I've joined during 2020 doesn't compare to this because of how great the quality was from the video, the content that you guys are putting out there, the thought behind even like the workshops that you get, like all of the assets, everything was thought out. So to go in person for my first time in 2021, when you have already had so many events, like it's insane to think that that was after a year where you had to change everything.
Truly. And honestly, we had such a ramp up in 2020, but it was interesting because pre-2020, the tone of women in business as a whole was extremely positive, aspirational. Like we had the Emily Weisses raising billions. We had like, it was all like, yes, we've got this, rah, rah, rah. And then when 2020 hit and it was like women were exponentially more affected than men from the pandemic, whether it was through layoffs, working at home as working moms, it all plays into each other. Women having limited access to funding when the only thing to get you through the pandemic was cash and cash flow means tons of women-owned small businesses were wiped out because of the pandemic. And it was at that moment, like I remember in March where we were the small female-owned business that were like, what are we going to do? Like war room style, like we got to figure this out. We have to unpack a year's worth of events that we had. But I also was like, what is everyone else freaking out about? Like, let's just start publishing content using the questions that we're like, what is a PPP loan? How are we doing this? Like, how should you start thinking about cash flow? And let's just start pumping up the content and the questions that we're asking each other. And that's what we did. We created a COVID-19 hub of information that was just all around, because it was all flying at us in real time of like, how to, you know, go back to work. Should you go back to work? How are you testing? Where to get tests as like, you know, PPP loans, SBA loans. Like we were all over it. And the tone changed to like, truly helping these small business owners survive.
Yeah, stay afloat.
It was different. It was different. So we took it very seriously. And like, I think to your point, so many people were searching at that time. And luckily we were the resource they went to.
It's so amazing. And so during Create and Cultivate, you guys do pitch contests, which I think is really, really cool. And it's like, I cry I cry about everything, but I cry every time when someone wins the money because they like genuinely need it. And I do think getting on stage and going through why your business deserves it. I think even applying the application process within itself is like so amazing for someone to take the courage and have the confidence to do that. So I absolutely love that. And I would like to dive into New Money Ventures and this process of what you need to raise money, but also like, what are we not doing? And to support more women to raise money. And in your story on Instagram, you had posted that TechCrunch posted written an article, and it said women-founded startups raised 1.9 of all VC funds in 2022, which is a drop from 2021, which was 2.4%. And the last time it was this low was back in 2012. In the article, it also says that the reason why this happened is investing in women is still high risk. Okay. Which I was already triggered in itself.
Totally.
I'm like, what do you mean? Yeah, like, what?
For sure.
But I want to talk a little bit about, and I had people submit questions online about like what they really need to understand when it comes to having a good business, having a sellable business. And now you're doing so much consulting and people can book time with you
it's so fun.
which is so cool. Like all of the coaching. And so I'm going to go through some of these questions. What makes a good idea or a business worth investing in? Like, what do you consider?
Yes. Okay. So there's different types of investments, and I think that's important to understand. So when it comes to venture capital is there to accelerate exponential growth. We're talking like hundreds of millions and billions of dollars type of growth. So for instance, that can be a lot of different things, but most companies should not take venture capital. That's just the reality. A good example of a company I use a lot that would need venture capital is Rent the Runway, right? Hey, I have this idea. I want to rent couture nice clothing. I want to ship it to people. I want them to ship it back to me. I want to dry clean it. Like that logistically as a business idea is going to require a ton of capital. And if done right, can generate hundreds of millions of dollars. That's a venture-backed business. On the flip side, there are some businesses where I'm like, you don't need venture capital like to kind of function in the world. Like it doesn't need to be $100 million billion business. And I think that's something that people need to understand is that when a venture capitalist invests in you, it's not so that you can like grow by a couple million. They're expecting huge exits. So that just to level set that expectation of like going after venture capital just because you're like, I need money is not always the solution. Strategic angels and investments, different story. That can make a lot of sense for a business. People who advocate for you, who provide a certain amount of strategic insight into your industry, can write checks and you can raise, $500,000 to $1 million, whatever it ends up being. There's also really strong loans that you can get, loans, credit lines, that if you just need that little bump of cash to make that one hire that's going to change your business, you don't need to go raise venture for that. So that's first and foremost. What makes a good idea, for venture is someone who, again, requires a ton of capital, and that capital will rocket ship them into high amounts of revenue and these days profitability. So that's what I would say in terms of funding.
Okay. And so New Money Ventures, tell me about the start of that and because I feel like you were so passionate about it and it's so exciting to watch you do something new. Again, moving from events to this, I feel like is such a change and I want to learn all about it.
It is a change. So basically the way this came about was one, I've been angel investing for over 10 years. So I've angel invested in Away Luggage, Ceremonia, Live Tinted, truly a Chill House, a bunch of really amazing female owned brands. And I've been doing that for a long time. And mostly because I believe in the founders, I believe in the products, and I'm excited to obviously help other women raise money and be part of their story. So that's great. I realized in doing the Create and Cultivate events, every single event, that stat was talked about. Oh, only 2 point. If you think about that, that stat is so staggeringly low. It's laughable. It's laughable. 1.9%, 1% of all fund. And there's billions of dollars being deployed. So it's really a problem. Everyone kept talking about it. And I was like, that's so interesting. As someone who's never raised money, like, what's going on here? And what I found was in doing the research, it's that 5% of venture funds are managed by women. And when you think about that stat coupled with the other stat, you're like, oh yeah, because the reality is venture is based on deal flow. That's how that industry works. You get sent companies, people pitch you. Thousands of people are pitching these funds a day, but the ones that they pay attention to are the ones coming through their networks that have the validated stamp, that knows someone that can get them in the room. And when you look at the bulk of who runs venture capital, it's older white men. So their network's going to look a lot like them. And so when you start thinking about the process of deal flow and the women running the funds who have actual power to deploy capital, 5% of the funds are probably getting 1% of the deal flow. So I was really frustrated by that. And I understood like I had something really unique to offer in the venture market, which is unprecedented access to women-led company deal flow. And because I get pitched all the time and I get access to all these amazing women. Like I met, Jen Rubio, Tyler Haney, all these girls early days of their business. Emily Weiss was our first keynote at Create Cultivate,
Crazy.
which is
Yeah.
insane.
Yeah.
Like, so I knew I had something special. And so I knew I wanted to kind of bring that to the marketplace. So that's really what New Money Ventures is all about. We are a fund that deploys capital into female-led companies. We have different mandates throughout the year of like investing in different types of companies, whether it's CPG or the creator economy or fintech or whatever. But our sort of idea is money meets mentorship. Like we want to not only provide capital, but the mentorship to help them build, grow, and eventually exit their business, which is really exciting.
That's amazing. And it's insane that this is the first time I've ever heard about the 5%.
I know.
People only talk about the 1.9.
1.9.
Like it's crazy.
Yeah.
And so highlighting the 5% and that's wild. So from the founder's point of view, when do you know if it's time to throw in the towel and just move on? Like if this company is not a good idea.
Yeah. So I think that comes down to a few different things. One is your company making money? Like that's just like the number one thing, right? Is your company generating cash? And is it generating more cash than it is spend? It's the oldest trick in the book, right? It's like, oh, what makes a successful business? Making more money than what you spend. Like that is how you like quantify a successful business. That being said, it's not always going to make money. And like, especially at the beginning, you're probably going to be spending more than you are. But is there momentum behind it? That's where I sort of like always look to it. Is there an upswing? Is something happening where you're like really seeing people double down on something? And that could look like, I always say, like, if you were like, I'm going to open a pie shop, my pies are delicious. Like everyone's going to love my pies. And everyone comes in and buys your chocolate chip cookies. Like you have a problem in your business and like you need to pay attention to where the momentum is. And if everyone's going for the chocolate chip cookies, you're now a cookie shop. Like that is what you're doing. So being able to not be so married to what you set out to do and being able to change and shift accordingly, I think is really important.
Because I think a lot of the conversation that exists is like being resilient and sticking it out and like not giving up and it's like, but when is it? And I like that you highlighted that, especially from the pie and the cookies. Now, from a VC perspective, what would you say when you're looking at a business and you're like, you just like, do you know when you're looking at a business of like, this is not a good idea? And what are the things that you're noticing that you're like, no,
totally. So
and how do you tell a founder that?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like I'm one of the more friendly VCs. I think other VCs are way harsh, but I think, look, the moment you want to raise money is when you don't need the cash. People who are like, I need this money to survive, to have my company get through this period of time, it's the worst time to raise money because VCs smell blood in the water for sure. And they can see it. It's all in the numbers, right? The numbers tell a story. So that's number one, is like when you're looking to go out for venture capital or any kind of funding really besides like a loan or whatever, you need to be in a place where you are good financially. Like you don't need this cash, but you want this cash because this cash is going to get you to, X, Y, and Z result. So that's first and foremost. What venture capitalists are going to look at is the founder and the team. That's like number one. And that's number one for me. The reality is like you're investing in people. Like the product is secondary. If the person behind it is an exited founder, has some sort of unique experience, unique value that they can provide, check, check, check. That's all good things. If on top of that, they have a team around them that's seasoned, that's really strong, check, check, check. That's all good things. So that's first and foremost. Then you're going to look at, is this product or service or whatever it is disruptive? Is this something new? Is this something interesting? Or is it entering in an existing marketplace, but it's better, it's cheaper, it's faster, it's whatever, like it's going to knock out the competition? What is like the unique value in this specific product? If you have a patent, if you have proprietary technology, anything like that, check, 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 all good things. Then they're going to look at the margins, and that's everything. That's like the biggest thing, right? Mm-hmm. What are the margins on your product? What's unit economics behind it? How much does it cost for you to acquire a customer? all these different things. And what's that story and that journey look like? So if you're, a company that's been around for a while, have you been able to get your customer acquisition costs really low? Check mark. Great. Is your margins, again, getting higher and higher and higher as you do that? Again, great. It's looking at all those different things and how the stories tell the numbers. Then they're going to say, why do you want this money? What are you using it for? And sometimes founders don't have a good answer for that. They're like, marketing. And you're like, marketing? Okay, so you're just using this to give it to Facebook essentially? Like, no, that doesn't feel like it's going to get you anywhere that's going to be a game changer for us in terms of investment. The use of funds is super important. Is it to build a new product? Is it to add to the team that's going to change something, drastically? Is it to, build out a new warehouse that's going to make your shipping go down? Whatever it is, like that needs to be very spelled out on like what this use of funds is going towards and where it's going to get you in the future. And then lastly is like, what's your exit strategy? Like, where do you see the opportunity for M&A, or are you going to bring this company public? How, where does that sort of work? And I think sometimes if you're going out to raise venture and you don't foresee an exit, then that's not a good fit for you. Like, because venture expects an exit.
Okay. So yeah, that was my question of like, angels, do they not necessarily expect the exit?
No.
Venture. Okay. So what I'm interested in knowing, just like you walking that through, what are the red flags when someone is pitching? Like, yes, okay, you're not making money fast enough. And one of the things you talk about products a lot. More product companies get from venture firms, right? Venture capital firms. Why is it harder for more service-based companies to do that? And then in my mind, like, which infuriates me because I feel like my brain doesn't process it, but Create and Cultivate would be to me a service, but it's not. The product is the event. Is that how it is?
Hard.
Like, explain this.
Okay. So raising money against service-based businesses is extremely challenging because it's reliant on the people. So for instance, like my first company, and then I'll talk about Create and Cultivate, was a marketing agency. It's doing a couple $1 million a year. But like, what are they buying? It's me, it's my team, it's like the way we sell and the way we do business. But what is that value actually? You're buying the clients, I guess, but are those contracts year long? That's 1 year. How am I investing in you and what am I doing? Just getting more and more people? Whereas product, when you scale and grow, all your costs go down because it's like volumizing out. The more you make, the less it costs. So it's an easy way to wrap your head around something that's going to grow, get easier to make, sell more. Those things all add up. So Create and Cultivate, what was interesting is that we never went out to raise money, but I think if we did, we probably wouldn't have been successful. Only because, again, one is like the thought of going in and being like, it's a women's, but like I feel like they would have been like, it's, gross. Let me ask my daughter what she thinks, like whatever. But it was like the thing that we did that successfully, I think, was we expanded our products, right? So we had events, we had podcasts, we had books, we had online digital membership, we had content, we had so much, a good revenue mix, which made us highly, sellable in a way. But from a buy perspective, the only reason I think someone would have invested in us was to get it to the place of high growth, which would have been challenging for us because events was so much a part of it. But I feel like someone would have invested in us to build the digital side of our business out. That being said, I looked at the marketplace of like, who did that? Refinery, PopShare, all these companies that raised so much money in the media space failed. And I was like, I also don't want to be that person, and we were highly profitable. We were a highly profitable company. And like, we didn't need the cash. That was like the beauty of our situation, is like, we knew we didn't need it. And every like year I'd go to my partners, like, do we raise? And it was always like, we don't need to. Like, would it have expedited and made our lives probably easier? Yeah. But like in the end, we would have been giving up more of our equity, and we owned equity in a really strong business. So it was like, why not just see if we can sell this without ever having to raise? So service-based businesses, that's why it's hard. It's harder to scale. It's harder to quantify that side of it in terms of investment. It's easy to sell those companies because there's intrinsic value in what you do. So for instance, if you're a marketing agency that specializes in, video content production, and Edelman, who's like massive PR conglomerate, is like, we need to start making video, it makes sense for them to acquire that and pull it in versus like having to build it from scratch.
Yeah. I think about that all the time. So I work with personal brands. Like
Yeah.
I work with the human, right? Like I work with you to really clarify who you are, what your message is, what you want people to know you for, and then help you monetize that.
Yeah.
But when you're monetizing that, it's again, it goes back to you. And so it's interesting hearing the story back for 2018 of like, people are coming for you. Everything is dependent on you. And so you had to shift that to really like, yes, build the team, but also make sure people knew Create and Cultivate for Create and Cultivate, not Create and Cultivate for Jaclyn Johnson.
Yes, which was very intentional.
Yeah. And I think that's hard to do because people buy from people. People are sold on the other human. And so again, seeing all the products that you guys have under New Money Venture, I look at the brands and I know the founders. I'm like, I know this woman behind this brand, and I know her story. And I think that there's just such a beautiful blend when it comes to blending the actual founder, their story, who they are, and then the product. I think it's really cool. So I want to talk about the red flags. Red flags when you're getting a pitch, like what does that look like when you're like, no?
One is like when you realize they're about to run out of money. Like you know that they need the money. Because when you're doing diligence, you see everything. You see their bank accounts, you know exactly where everything's going, where it's come, blah, blah, blah. So if you see that they're about to run out of money, that's when you know it's like a little bit of a red flag. Like, why did that happen? Why are we at this point? Like, why are we at this place? And there could be like totally reasonable explanations for that. There could be like a lot that you learn there. The other thing is the customer acquisition cost really high? A good example is I got pitched by this company and it was actually 3 dudes who run it. And they were like, we're crushing it. And they actually had a really unique product. I was super interested in it. And he was like, we're crushing it. We're year 2 and we're doing 30 million in rev. And I was like, holy, that's insane. How? And like that was the headline in their deck. And then they went through everything and like the product mix. I'm like, that is amazing. In doing the diligence on that company, I realized that they were spending like $50 million in marketing. So their customer acquisition costs and their spend, anyone could do $30 million a year. If you're spending $50 million a year in marketing, like that's insane. So the story they were trying to tell the numbers didn't reflect it. So I think it's about, again, like how are you acquiring customers and are they staying? That's the other thing. The iOS update really screwed CPG founders, but before then it was really cheap and easy to get customers. So everyone's like, wow, like your customer acquisition costs are low. But what they weren't looking at and what they should have been looking at is what is the retention of those customers? Because it's actually more valuable to have 5,000 customers that keep coming back, keep buying more than to have 50,000 customers that bought once and haven't shopped again.
I love that. And it's so interesting to also see you dive into the numbers because again, when you're looking at a business from outside, you don't know.
Oh yeah.
Which is why you should not be copying a business just from their success on the outside because you have no idea the fires or what's happening on the inside.
Sure. And it's a rough time right now for CPG brands. Everyone's running out of cash because investors aren't investing. It's a really scary time. And the people who have been budgeting, who have been cash conscious, who have been worried about their cash flow are the ones that are going to survive this time period.
What is something new that you have going on right now? I know you're doing a lot of mentoring and coaching. This is like, again, the thought of being able to book a 60-minute call with you and have one-on-one, like really get advice from you. What does that look like?
I'm obsessed with, so I'm on this app called Intro. I found out about it last year. I've done over 100 sessions so far and I'm like obsessed. I've met so many cool people, but basically you can book me for 15 minutes, 30 minutes, whatever, so on and so forth. And we just chat and it's all over the place. I mean, it's like someone's like, what do I do with my personal money? How do I make more money? Personally, I'm doing well. Hi, I need to fire this person. How do I handle it? Hi, I need to raise money. Hi. Like, I love it. And we just like get into it. So over the last year with New Money Ventures, obviously Create and Cultivate, all these things, like I've realized that there is a lot of women that come to me on Intro and have amazing businesses, like profitable, crushing it. I talked to this woman the other day, 16 million in rev, profitable, killing it. And she's like, I think I want to raise money. I just like don't know anything about raising money, which was me at Create and Cultivate, like running a sick business, doing really well. And then like if someone was like, oh, like what's your ROAS and do you have a deck and are you thinking of doing this on a safe or what's the cap? I would have been like, pardon? Like, what are we saying? And it is a language. It's a language and it's a world in itself. And I've now infiltrated said world and I know a lot and I know how the game is played and I know how to like work it and I know what you need to be doing as a founder to start to dip your toe into that venture capital or even strategic world. And so I'm going to launch a boot camp around venture funding and funding in general. And I think like every founders should take this course because I think, again, you don't necessarily have to go out and raise money, but at least you'll know the information and the language and the way to talk about things if you ever did. So I'm super excited about that. Hopefully in the next few months, I'll get that out.
Oh my God, that's amazing. And I also think it's the process of it and everything that you've talked about. Even if you're not planning to sell your business, to your point, imagine now having your numbers in order, having the decks that you need to have, understanding the language, which is just going back to Work Party. You have at the end the vocabulary and like really breaking down the definition. That is so powerful because. And I remember when I first started at Yahoo, they were saying words like CPA and I'm like, I don't know what that means. Like, please just talk like a normal human and say things out. And so it's just so valuable, I feel like, for anybody. And I'm excited for it. So congratulations for hopefully soon launching the boot camp. Okay, so I want to do some rapid fire questions.
Okay,
you ready?
Do it. Yes.
Okay. What is something you miss from the start of your entrepreneurship journey that you'll never get back?
Oh, the excitement around doing something on your own. Like the moment the gates opened at Create Cultivate, like I feel like I almost like would pass out because I'd be like so happy because I'd be a dead body of like not sleeping for like 4 days before. But like that feeling and joy of it being truly yours and like knowing that you've built something, like that's hard. That's such an amazing feeling and it's hard to let go of. And I wish I would have appreciated it more in the moments.
I love that. I mean, I was crying in my hotel last night because I was like, this is insane. Like being able to come to LA from Boston to interview all of these amazing humans, right? Not just founders, but like amazing humans having a podcast. I'm like, I can't believe I get to do this. And it's so hard to like acknowledge that when you're living it every day.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And then it's like
you're in the work.
You're in it. So I absolutely love that. How would you describe your relationship with yourself in one word?
I feel like I'm my best friend and probably worst critic.
I 100% feel that. Happiness level 1 to 10. And if it's not a 10, what would make you go to a 10?
I mean, I probably even like an 8. 10 would be, I don't know. I think I'm in a like interesting phase of my life where I'm loving the investing stuff, but I've like let go of my baby in some ways. And I'm kind of like in a what's next moment. So I feel like once I get over that what's next moment, I'll be like a 10.
I love that. I feel like, again, thinking back to walking into that room in 2021 and freezing when I saw you, it's literally like, they don't even look at you as like a human anymore. It's like a celebrity. I know it's comical to you, but I was like, guys, I have Jaclyn Johnson coming. Like, I don't know what I'm going to do with myself. But truly, like you have, again, built this very aspirational brand. So I'm interested to know, what are insecurities that you felt have held you back most over the years?
Oh my God. I mean, so many. I mean, first of all, that's so sweet. Thank you. But I think for me, I definitely undervalue. I 100% undervalue. And it's like funny because I tell everyone else, I'm like, ask for more. And then I'm over here like, sure, I'll do it for that. So I think, and it's funny because like people have always told me that. Like at my first business, I actually like I'm sorry, these are not rapid fire anymore. I'm like fully same. But one of my friends was like, you're grossly undercharging. Charge, $10K a month for this next client. And I did. And I remember I got it and I was like, oh my God, I've been undercharging for so long. And even with Create and Cultivate, like I was like, okay, you can come and do it. Okay. Like for like a little, I'm just such a sucker for that. But I definitely think I undervalue myself like 100%. I think that's true. I think also, sometimes it's funny you say that about me because I say that about other people, right? I remember always like looking and being like, God, like, Whitney Wolf's on the cover of that and she IPO'd for like $1 billion and like, oh my God, Emily Weiss is doing that. And being like, I suck. Like, I'm not even close to that. And I think it's something we all do. And then I like hear people say like what you just said. And I'm like, oh my God, I have done something pretty cool. I think I'm just really hard on myself when it comes to like pushing myself to be like super successful. But I think I've gotten better at being like more accepting of the fact that like, I don't need to be $1 billion exit to be successful. Like I need to let women know that they can do this on their own terms. And so I've really embraced that.
I love that. And it's so refreshing to hear that from you because that's a lot of the times like what holds us back, right?
Yeah.
Like, especially again, thinking back to Create and Cultivate, like a lot of these women come alone.
Yeah.
They come to these events by themselves. I've always gone by myself and I'm like, hi, how are you? I'm Marina. And I'm not an introvert. Like I'm an extrovert. I love conversations, but you go into this room and you just feel like less than, or you're like, what do I have of value? And it doesn't even have to be that. Like you are enough the way you are. And so I love that you sharing that insecurity. Last one question that you wish I would have asked you, and how would you have answered it?
Oh gosh. I mean, I don't know. I feel like your questions were really good. I know. I feel like you nailed it. Are you kidding? No, I feel like this was such a good conversation.
Amazing. So the last thing is I would love to end. So this podcast is called She Did It Anyway.
Mm-hmm.
And I share my story of, coming here, being homeless with my parents from Egypt, being a single mom at 23, like getting laid off and just always being able to do it anyway. I would love for you to say, in a sentence, take a second to think of, through fill in the blank, I did it anyway.
My gosh. I think for me, it's really like through every possible person saying no, I did it anyway. I was told no so many times, along the way, and all it takes is one yes.
I love it. I love it. I'm so excited that you were here. I can't thank you enough. This has been so cool. And you're just like such a fun, laid back human. And I feel like people just need to like see that side and really get to spend more time with you because it's just so amazing. I'm excited for the boot camp.
Yes.
I will add in the show notes, work party, every single person, even if they are not an entrepreneur, needs to read it because you break down the advice and your story so beautifully that I literally, if you open this, there's like notepads and highlights. I was like, I need to save this. I need to add it to my notes. So I'm so grateful for you. Thank you so much.
Of course. And I just want to say congratulations. You are incredible. Like you truly are the embodiment of what Create and Cultivate is. And I just love that you went from attendee to being on the stage. Like you've done it. So you should be really proud.
And don't forget, no matter what, she did it anyway.
You did it, Mom.